and almost as if when you put the pen or the pencil on the paper, they become almost like the one at that point where they merge. So it's interesting what you're saying. I was going to discuss one thing about, and it goes into this idea of, definitions. And maybe the problem is that, we're trying to define something that shouldn't be defined, and so it's defeating the whole purpose of trying to talk about who is God, is defeating the whole purpose. And there's this idea of negative theology, where you are not describing what God is or what God has, but the only way to approach God is to say what he is not. And keep doing that and doing that and doing that. So God is not a man. God is not an animal. God is not a thing. That the only way is through negatives. Because eventually when you negate everything, you come to this silence. There's nothingness. There's void. And I'm sure this is also linked with certain philosophies as well. And I want to go back to Meister Eckhart. I think he also discusses this. There's some that mention about the voids, nothingness as being, again, the ground of all being. And it can relate to the idea in the Quran about Surah Ikhlas. In the very last verse, that there is nothing comparable to him. And I think that gets overlooked sometimes when Muslims talk about God. They always talk about oneness. And that's important, obviously, because that's the one thing that you have to have as your principle. But going a little bit beyond that, when you're defining something, it's always set about on the background of comparing it with something else. This can here, no logo, so it's not an advertisement, is here, okay? So the can has got a particular shape that's different from other things, a particular height that's different from other things, but it's only through comparison that I can know and define this as being a can. So it takes definition, but definition involves comparison. So when you're saying that there's nothing compared to God, then how do you describe what is by definition indescribable? The only way you can approach God is maybe through that negative theology of God is not. When we talk about maybe the attributes, we'll say, oh, but God is merciful.